Dr. Brujic is a 2002 graduate of New England College of Optometry, and we're really pleased to have him with us today. Without further ado, Dr. Brujic.
Thanks, Josh. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, first of all, thank you on behalf of Valley Contax. Thank you for inviting me here, and I really enjoy being at the lab just because of how much we've had a chance to interact as well too. And for the third-year students that are here, thank you guys so much for being here. I've really had really been honored to be able to interact with you guys here today. This is an interesting topic that we're going to be discussing about today because you guys are going to be embarking at this point moving forward onto a different part of your whole educational forum, because up to this point you guys have really been given most of your information. You've had to research some of that information, and you've had some clinical experience with patients, but as you move into your fourth year, you're going to transition into something very, very different. You're going to go into this student-clinician mindset, and you're going to transition into a clinician-student mindset. That's actually where you're now going to really embrace the power of what it really means to take patient responsibility into your own hands, certainly under the security of preceptors and residents, but you're really going to be starting to take charge of the management of these patients. And it's a fortunate time that we're doing that at this point in optometry. And the reason why I say that is because we've evolved so much as a profession. To put things into perspective, just like Josh said earlier, I'm a 2002 grad of the New England College of Optometry. And in that 11 years, I've seen some significant changes in our practices, in particular with a lot of the technologies, some in eyeglass lenses, some in the contact lenses that we're actually fitting, and in the way that we're actually managing ocular surface disease. And I think it's important for us to embrace and embark on that portion of optometry. But when we look at what classically made optometry a profession, and when we take a step back and think about that, it was really the eyeglasses that we prescribed. 50, 60 years ago, that was the mainstay of a practitioner's income. And it's interesting to see what's happened to that portion of our business models. I think many of you have probably visited or been on a website where you can go and get glasses for $30, $40, $50. There are various online vendors at this point that are really competing with us from a commoditization perspective. Well, what do I mean when I say commodity? This is the first key thing that I want to really bring home today with you guys, this whole concept of commodity and commoditization, because this is really going to set the premise for how I want you leaving here thinking today. Because from a big retailer online or on an internet, what they want our patients to think is that there's literally no difference between what they're actually giving our patients or what they're offering them online and what we could actually provide them. I would challenge every single one of you in this next year, what makes a pair of glasses from Pacific University or from any practice that you're in different than what somebody can get online? Is there differences? Well, yeah, we think there is in our practice, and we actually differentiate that. Part of the reason is we want to decommoditize ourselves. From our patient's perspective, if they don't know any different, they're going to listen to what they learn. And if they're only hearing from major manufacturers or major retailers that want to commoditize this whole process, they're going to think there's no difference except for one thing: the cost of the glasses that they're actually getting. So what we do is we aggressively decommoditize ourselves. And the way we do that is every single time we give an eyeglass prescription to a patient, the thing they walk away with is a small little brochure that says 5 reasons why we think it's best for you to get your glasses at our practice. And one of the #1 reasons that we put on there is that online vendors, for those of you that don't know this, they actually tested these lenses. 50% of the glasses were wrong. They failed some type of ANSI standard. They passed because of incorrect prescriptions. So what we do is we guarantee that that prescription is correct. And we do that through a very aggressive process. And the reason why is, from our patient's perspective, we don't want other people controlling that conversation. We actually want to take a hold and we want to control that conversation. So what about other things that have been traditionally owned by optometry and eye care and real live practitioners, which is the whole contact lens side of our practices? This is interesting because this is one of those areas that's actually become most susceptible. There are challenges that there's no difference between what you're going to get from an online provider versus our offices. Well, I challenge you to take a step back and really attempt to differentiate yourselves in terms of the way you're fitting contact lenses, and I challenge you to really sit back and think how you can potentially change that conversation. So now when a patient's hearing, there's no differences except for the cost, you now can say, well, wait a second, there is a cost difference, but here are the other differences that we really want to make sure that we're delivering to you. This whole concept of commodity is important, and it's something that I want you to think about as we go through this whole discussion, because I want you guys to aggressively picture yourselves decommoditizing yourselves, making yourselves physically look different than everything else or all the other retailers, and then giving your patients that information and making sure that you're controlling that conversation to patients. So how do you do that? Well, here's the second thing that I kind of want you to remember from this discussion that we're having today, is this whole concept of a positive patient experience. You know, we talk about this term a lot and we think, oh yeah, I get it. We want to make something a positive patient experience, but what's the realities and what's the steps to actually making that happen? Well, there's a real easy equation that I want you guys to remember, and I heard it years ago from Derek Artis, who presented it to a group of us. And essentially, what it says is a patient's experience is equal to their perception of the goods or services that they actually received, minus what they were expecting to receive. So what does that mean? Well, we don't know what their expectations are walking into our practices. But if we can leverage their perception as high as possible of the visit and the experience or in the products that we're actually dispensing in our office, we know that we can actually leverage a positive patient experience. If we deliver less than what they actually expected to get, they're a negative experience. And if we can deliver exactly what they're expecting, the only thing we've done is we've created a neutral response from a patient's perspective. Now, sometimes I think it's easiest to discuss this kind of stuff and to really hit home with concepts, just completely leaving eye care out of it. I want to give you a perfect example of a positive patient experience completely out of eye care. So let's say, and I'm a happily married man, I've been married for 14 years, and let's say I'm heading home tomorrow and I'm saying, Sonia, I want to take you out for a glass of wine. Well, she's going to have certain expectations just from the last time that I told her about taking her out for a glass of wine. But what if instead of me picking her up at our house, I actually have a driver drive me up in the driveway and have that driver come up and pick her up? Okay, the experience is already a positive one. Why? Because she was expecting something and I already delivered against those expectations in a positive way. So her perception of this whole thing is already better. And then I say, okay, Sonia, she gets in the back of the car and I have a bottle of wine sitting back there with 2 little glasses. If there's anybody from any type of highway patrol, this is just for the terms of the story. But so now there's this positive perception that's being created. And in Bowling Green, Ohio, yeah, we could stay there for a glass of wine, but I take her up to Toledo. And it is just the best place that you could picture in your mind. Nice, fancy setting. We walk into the doors. I've already called the restaurant so that they know that Sonia and I are coming up there, so that they actually greet us by our names when we actually walk into the whole place. We sit down. There's already a big shrimp cocktail that's sitting there with those huge shrimp that are just absolutely delicious. And when the wine gets poured, I don't care what wine is in that glass. It's going to be a phenomenal glass of wine. Her perception of that experience has so far exceeded her expectations that we've created this positive experience for her. That's actually what I want you to kind of have in mind when you're actually creating these experiences for your patients, because we want to maximize that positive experience. Well, let's talk about a negative experience, because I think it's important to discuss that if we're going to talk about positive patient experiences or positive experiences. So what happens if, for example, after that, I say, hey, Sonia, listen, next weekend, I want to take you out for a glass of wine. And instead of picking her up in a nice car, I pick her up in the old Jeep Liberty. And the Jeep Liberty, always from the day we bought it, kind of creaked when we opened the door. I didn't get the door for her. I called her or texted her to tell her that I was home. So she walks outside, she opens the creaky door, she goes into the Jeep Liberty. And then instead of taking her to a restaurant, which is what she's dressed up for, down to the nines, dressed up in a nice dress, nice high heels, I take her to a family function. And guess what? It just rained in Bowling Green, Ohio. And because of that, there's a high level of humidity. And because of the high level of humidity, her heels are sinking in the ground as she's walking. And instead of getting this nice glass of wine. What she gets served, her glass of wine, is in one of those kegger cups, and it comes out of a box. I don't care what you serve her at that point. It's a negative experience, and here's the reason why. She had certain expectations walking in there when I said, hey, I want to take you out for a glass of wine. And what I did was I delivered far lower than what she actually expected to get. So we've created a negative experience for her. Think about this equation. Every single patient transaction that you have, from when you're in the exam room to how people are greeting your patients out in the front desk area, to how they're actually finishing up with your patients when they're in the optical or working with them with contact lenses, because it's going to leave a lasting impression. So now, how do we leverage a positive patient experience? In particular, when we're talking about the contact lens portion of our practices, because this is significant. And I think one of the ways we do that is we leverage every single means we possibly can in terms of increasing their perception of both the materials that they're actually receiving and their experience with our office. One of the most important things that I can tell you that will influence how a patient perceives our experience is how we actually communicate with them. It's amazing to me how much time we sometimes and how much efforts we put into the actual words that we say to patients. And sometimes we have checklists of what we need to do, and oftentimes we actually forget that we're not making things on a line. It's not something that is a reproducible event. It's something where we're interacting with real live people, and it's something that we always have to have or keep in the back of our minds, but it's something that we constantly have to be conscious about when we're communicating with these people, because ultimately what they're going to be doing in our practice is receiving care, and much of the experience that they're going to be receiving is based on how we communicate both the technologies and also the exam. Think about little things like, when they call your practice, are they hearing that you are an active contact lens practice? One of the things that we do with our patients, which I don't think many other practices are doing, is this small one line. And everybody that answers our phone when somebody's calling to schedule an appointment, and when we remind them the day before their appointment, gives them this reminder. Can you please bring in your contact lens case, solutions, and any other products that you use to care for your eyes or your lenses? Why? We can sometimes uncover comfort issues that patients may have with their lenses. We simply might not know about some of the drops or some of the solutions that they're actually using, and we can actually maybe improve that experience. But ultimately, when people are walking out of our offices, they need to feel good about the services and the products they actually received. What if I came up here and Josh introduced me and I said, hey guys, for the next half hour to 45 minutes, I'm going to be talking to you about really creating a positive patient experience. You guys are going to be looking at each other. You guys are going to be texting each other saying, this guy's weird. This is a little bit awkward, and I don't feel comfortable here anymore, and I don't know how I'm going to be engaged with this person. Ultimately, we know that what our patients perceive and what just people perceive as communication is over 50% body language. And we need to be cognizant of that. And one of the things we need to do when we're engaging our patients is making sure we're actually leveraging that. Do things as basic as eye contact and making sure that we're actually looking at people when we're actually talking to them. And we want to make sure that we're making eye contact, but we don't want to make sure that it's not creepy in a way. I mean, you want to break eye contact as well, too. You don't want to make it an uncomfortable situation, but make sure you're being cognizant of that. In particular, in the era of electronic medical records, it's oftentimes too easy in our minds to actually turn around and place a back to a patient. This is one of the things that's actually now becoming common to denote with not even an eye care practitioner, but a healthcare provider who's on electronic medical records. They know that they're going to see our back for a certain period of time. So you know how we break that conversation? After I'm done with the examination, it's usually after I've done my internal assessment, I actually tell the patient, you know, at this point, while your eyes are recuperating from all the lights that I just shone in your eyes, I'm going to make sure that I record everything that we just talked about in our electronic medical records. And that just literally puts a physical break on there so that they know that now I'm breaking to record everything that we just did, and then we'll talk about things after that. Over 30% of what a patient hears from us, it's not the words that we use, but the tone of voice that we use. I hate using Sonia in these examples, but it's so true, and you learn from your own experiences sometimes more than any other experiences. So it was shortly after I graduated, and I actually left a message on our home phone, because Sonia at the time was a student in pharmacy school. And here's how I left the message. Hey, son, yeah, just wondering what we're going to have for dinner tonight, so call me. Bye-bye. So I ended up getting home from the office before she did, and I actually listened back to my message, and I couldn't believe the type of message that I left for the woman that I decided to spend the rest of my life with. It was almost like I was a lawyer or an attorney leaving a message for somebody that was like in serious trouble. So I realized at that point that there was power in the way that we actually communicate, in particular with respect to the tone of the voice that we're actually utilizing. You know, this may be a fortunate or an unfortunate situation, but what you guys are perceiving right now, from what I'm telling you, only about 7% of what you guys are actually hearing is the words that I'm using. I actually have a very bad vocabulary. I don't speak well, I don't write well. When you transcribe what I just said, you'll find a lot of grammatical errors. You may or may not be perceiving those because I'm trying to actively engage you guys with my body language, and in addition to that, with the tone of my voice. And I think we need to do the same type of things when we're interacting with our patients, because patients will perceive what we're talking about and the excitement of what we're talking about through our body language and our tone of voice. How do you visualize, or how do you view Contax? Let's say somebody comes in with a spherical prescription and you're communicating with them on their contact lenses, and let's say for that patient you're saying, I think it's okay to continue with exactly what you're wearing right now. Is that what you say? Or do you say, you know, when I assess these contact lenses on your eyes, everything is as good as I think we can make it. And this fit is perfect. And this fit is what I feel is the best for your eyes. And the prescription is as good as we can really get it with these lenses. And I'm so glad that we made sure that this was happening at this year's visit. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to order your contact lenses. I need to see you back in about a year from now. Definitely, if you have any problems before then, you come on back sooner to see me. Otherwise, we'll make sure that we remind you to come on back in that year to make sure that your eyes are staying healthy with your contact lenses. I've educated you. I've told you what I actually want you to do, and I've provided you with a level of passion about what I'm working with you on, far greater than contact lenses are good, I'll see you back in a year, which is sometimes what we have the tendency to do, in particular as we get busier, because what we feel like is, well, this is a general or regular or routine process. And because this process to us is general or regular or routine, it's general or regular or routine to that person. Think about this, who sees us maybe once a year, maybe a little bit more often if there are problems or there are issues. So if that person's seeing us once a year and it's critically important for us to essentially win them over, wouldn't it be best for us to actually leverage everything we possibly can to tie that relationship as close as possible to that patient? And what that really involves is a number of things that we've actually been talking about up to this point. Taking yourself and not making that patient wonder, okay, so I came here again, they didn't switch my contact lenses, I'm wearing the exact same powers as I did before. Okay, and they did that last year and they did that the year before too. You know what you're starting to become when a patient's starting to perceive that? A commodity. Now you're starting to say, well, I can get an eye exam any place else. And wherever I get an eye exam, it's kind of the same thing. So the only difference that I perceive as a patient is the cost. That's what a commodity is. It's a product that different manufacturers make, and the only difference or the only variance that exists with these products from a customer's perspective is the actual cost of whatever widget's being sold. We want to make sure that everything we do from a patient perspective emulates that we're not the same widgets, or we're not the same two widgets. We want to take ourselves and remove ourselves from that bell curve so that we're decommoditizing ourselves aggressively. And one of the ways we do that is creating that experience that I was talking about. And we can leverage that through the actual communication that we utilize. Think about yourselves and think about how you guys are seeing contact lenses as a viable portion of your practices when you graduate, because it will influence the way that you guys communicate about the products and the services that you're actually providing. And you need to make sure that patients understand that this is truly a medical device, because if you're not telling them that. Somebody else will be telling them other information that we may be disappointed at, because other people will be controlling the communication for our patients. Think about things like when you're at the slit lamp. What do we do right now? And think about what you guys were doing here earlier, fitting each other in contact lenses, which, by the way, you guys did a phenomenal job. Technically speaking, you guys did a great job assessing those lenses. But from a patient's perspective, think about what they're hearing when they're behind a slit lamp and we're examining them. So they're sitting there, we're shining a lot of bright lights in their eyes. For some patients, it's a little bit more difficult for them to keep their eyes open. So what do they hear? They hear silence. They hear maybe a little squeaking from the slit lamp, depending on how oiled up or unoiled up it is. And this is what they're hearing from us. Please try and keep your eyes open. Please try and keep your eyes open. And then if they can't keep their eyes open, you know what we do without even telling them? What do? You just reach over and you open their eyelids. Thanks, doctor, for touching me without even asking me if it was okay to be touched. And then you try and pry those eyes open and you're saying, look here. Look at my ear with your other eye. Look at my ear. And that's the experience that our patients get when they're behind the slit lamp. Now think about that from your perspective. What would you picture, or what would your perception be of that experience? You'd probably think, yeah, he's a good optometrist, Brujic, but he's a little rough. And why is he a little rough? Because I didn't communicate anything. The only thing I did was I told you what I actually wanted you to do in this aggressive way. What if I told you, you know, I know this light's going to be a little bit bright. I want you to try your best to keep your eyes as wide open as possible for me. And with this eye right here, I actually want you to look at this little knob on the slit lamp. You're doing such a good job. You know what? I need to keep your eyes open just a little bit more. I'm actually going to just help you keep your eyes open. That's already a better experience for that patient. Now, think about another, and in my mind, more important process. The contact lens evaluation. So this person may have a medical device on their eye for the first time. And what do? However poorly or well fit these lenses are, it's a best kept secret. We're looking at the lens, we're thinking in our head, this fits good. Yeah, this is good. Again, all in our minds. The patient's hearing this. Right? It's one of the reasons it's one of the reasons I'm glad we don't use a direct O-scope anymore. That was always an awkward situation for me and my optometrist growing up. It was always a little bit uncomfortable. Fortunately, he always had the mindset to use some type of breath mint before he was actually getting close up to me. But then we assess the other eye, and the exact same thing happens. It's this situation where we're assessing these lenses, and how poorly or how well they're fitting is the best kept secret. Why wouldn't we tell a patient how good they're fitting on the eyes? And do you think that would change or alter the perception? I understand this because I've actually talked to patients, people who are good friends, and I've asked them, what do you think about this when we do this part of the exam? I actually have good friends who are physicians who are patients at the practice. And they told me, yeah, you know, I actually like it when you're telling me what's going on. I don't want super technical jargon, but I want to know how these lenses are fitting. So this is how my fitting process works in the office. We place the lenses in the eyes, and if the lenses are sitting well, don't hide that. Share that with the patient. And this is my usual terminology. This lens is fitting so good on your eyes. I actually feel like this lens was built for your eye. Let's go check the other eye out. And we make this process where it's this positive patient experience. Why? I don't want that patient leaving my office thinking, you know what, these lenses are actually a little bit uncomfortable, or these lenses start to feel dry towards the end of the day, and I'm wondering if there's anything else that may be better for my eyes. I literally tell that patient, we're fitting you with what's in your best interest. It's one of those other terms that I love to utilize. It's actually something that I picked up from my senior partner, because whenever we're talking to patients, in particular about contact lens options, would you, as a patient, prefer to hear, oh yeah, this is the contact lens that's the best contact lens? Or would you rather hear, this is the contact lens that I feel is going to be in your best interest. This is the contact lens, in my mind, that's going to be best for you. Because ultimately, when we're selecting all of this, and this is, in my mind, the fourth key or critical component of this whole discussion this afternoon, is ultimately, when that patient's done with all of the products or purchasing the products and the services that they're going to be getting from our practice, are they going to feel like they actually have or have received value? Because if they receive value, we've got a check mark. If they feel like, you know what, I didn't receive value here, we got an X beside our name. So this concept of value is interesting because we oftentimes picture it as this concept, this term that's associated heavily on cost. And although cost is a component of it, it's not the whole picture. I'm reminded of a story when I was in high school, and as a teenager, I wasn't the most outgoing person. I was actually a little bit shy. I used to work in a grocery store in Essex, Ontario, which is where I actually grew up. And my manager at the time was an Italian guy, and he could really get at times very angry about things. Josh, he actually had a mustache that was very similar to the one that you're sporting today. You kind of remind me of him. You just smile a lot more than he did. Great guy, though, and he ended up being one of my true close friends, and I still go to visit him just to let him know everything that's going on professionally and with our practice and what we're doing. But my job that day was trimming lettuce, so I literally spent about 4 hours in the back room because head lettuce was on sale. So I was the guy that trimmed it up, bagged it up, and made sure that we had enough for the shelves. So he came back to the back room and he said, Mikey, he goes, look at these 2 heads of lettuce. And he called me Mikey because he couldn't pronounce my first name. And he told me the first day, I'm not going to learn how to pronounce it either, so I'm just going to call you Mikey. So he comes back and says, Mikey, look at these 2 heads of lettuce. This head of lettuce is nice, green, look at how big it is, and look at how small this head of lettuce is. You literally trimmed off all the lettuce off this head of lettuce. If somebody's seeing this and they pick up this small head of lettuce, guess what they're going to feel? They're going to feel like they didn't get a value, and I don't want my customers feeling like they didn't get a value. And I said, okay, yeah, I understand, Randy, kind of in my quiet way. And he said, no, I don't think you do understand. He goes, tell me what you think value means. And there are times as you're going through your formative years where you say certain things and you step back and you think about it over the next several days and think, God, I wish I would have said 1,000 things differently when he challenged me. Well, this wasn't one of those times. I looked at him straight in the eye, and I said, I think value is when somebody feels like they got their money's worth. And he kind of looked at me, and I could tell he was just ready to come back at me with something. And he said, yep, you're exactly right. I'm going to go back out there. And I thought, yes, I got him. But I realized something very important that day. I understood this concept of value. And I've actually applied this to every single thing that I've done because price points are very sensitive things to talk about. I think price, and when you're setting fees, when you're in practice, if you have the opportunity to do that, I think that's something that you set up towards the end. You determine what services you're going to provide, and then you start determining what the value of those services are, really putting a price tag on it. Because what you're really doing is you're measuring, saying, well, service-wise, what are we actually providing for this patient, and how much does it actually cost? And what our duty is, our professional duty is, to make sure that that patient feels like they're receiving a value. To make sure that that patient, when they're all done with the whole experience, is to make sure that they're feeling like they got their money's worth. I don't care if you charge $1 for your eye exams. I don't care if you charge $10,000 for your eye exams. I don't care if you charge $1 for your contact lenses. I don't care if you charge $10,000 for your contact lenses. The moment a person's signing a check that they've worked hard for that money and they're not feeling like they've received or gotten what it's worth, that's when you've failed at the value proposition. So we constantly need to keep this at the top of mind. So now I have a real difficult question for you guys. How are you now going to leverage and position your contact lens practice to optimize patient expectations? I'm going to give you a few real-world examples. Had a new patient come into the office. This is what he literally told me before I even came into the room. I was walking into the room. He said, hey, doc, just want to tell you this is my bad eye. This is my good eye. I said, oh, why is that your bad eye? Oh, I've had a scar on it for years. They've always said they can't do anything about it. And he was right. It was his bad eye. It was about 20/60 best corrected with about 5 diopters of SIL. And his other eye, surprisingly, actually had the start of keratoconus. He was starting to notice some changes here, and it was starting to become slightly keratoconic. And I said, well, we can do one of 2 things. I can treat you exactly like everybody else did before you came in to see me today, and we can get you a pair of glasses to fix your right eye, and I can just give you a blank lens for your left eye because there's too much prescription there. You just wouldn't physically be able to adapt. And what he told me was, yeah, I've heard that story before. I said, but there's a possibility that we can make the vision in your left eye significantly better. He said, really? He goes, well, I don't want to do surgery. I said, no, it's not a surgery, but are you opposed to a contact lens? He said, I can't wear a contact lens. I have a scar on this eye. I said, well, yeah, we can. And here's how we would do it. There's actually a new type of lens called the custom stable lens that literally recreates the surface of your eye. And as it recreates the surface of your eye, I'm going to take all these irregularities, and I showed him the topographies that we actually measured. And I'm going to take that, I'm going to smooth it out, and I'm going to make it this regular surface at this point. And when we do that, I know you're going to see better than the way you do now. I don't know how much better you're going to see, but I know you're going to see better. He said, wow, let's do it. Let's give it a whirl. So we scheduled him back. Now, I've already exceeded his expectations. He came in expecting one thing, and I exceeded his expectations. So he's already had a positive experience. Now, before we schedule him back, here's what we make sure to tell him. I want you to plan on being in the office for about an hour and a half or 90 minutes. I don't think it's going to take you that long to be fit with this contact lens, but we're actually going to be putting multiple contact lenses on your eyes because we want to make sure we get the best fit. So he's prepared for that. Well, after 35 minutes, we've given him the perfect fit. I said, okay, you're all set for today. We're going to order your contact lenses, and when they come in, we're actually going to teach you how to put these contact lenses on, take them off, and care for them. He said, I'm done? I said, yeah. You said I was going to be here for an hour and a half. I said, I know. This fitting process actually went better than we expected. So now his perception's elevated a little bit more so. He already knows, too, that this lens is going to provide him good vision because he's already been able to experience it after we over-refracted him. Comes back in, sees me again. We put his brand new lenses on the eyes. He sees like a hawk. He's seeing 20/20 out of both eyes at this point. And now we've again leveraged that perception even higher against what he expected. We've literally delivered to this person something that he didn't even know existed. It's interesting when we talk about the business part of an optometric practice, and in particular contact lens practice, and we talk about it as being very separate as patient care, and in my mind, they're interwoven. We literally, all we have to do is what's in the best interest of the patient, and I promise you that if you keep that at the backbone of every single decision you make in your office, it'll lead to what's in the best interest of your practice, period. Because now what you've done with this person is you've created this buzz, you've created this excitement that exists for this patient. And what they're going to do is they're going to talk to their friends. And you know why I know that? Because I actually harbor and recruit patients that I actually enjoy. This is going to sound bad. I like working with all my patients, but specifically for those ocular conditions that you enjoy working with, what you really want to do is you want to ask that patient, well, refer other people that you know who might have this, because we can actually help them with this. Now that's going to seem like kind of a needy way to do it, and it might make you feel a little bit awkward, and it might make that patient feel a little bit awkward, and what you might have done from the perception is taking it from here and say, well, wait a second, this doc's really looking for business here. I don't know if I'm as confident as I am with this person as I was previously. So here's what we do. I'm so glad you selected our office, and I'm so glad that we got this working as well as possible. If you know of anybody that might benefit from this technology, definitely make sure to let them know. Thank you. And then they leave, they get checked out, all that good stuff, and then we see them for their regular follow-up visits after that. Make sure you're keeping those types of things in mind, because if you want patients to do something, you have to gently ask that, but you got to make sure that you're doing it. I want to share two other cases where, in my mind, I feel like these patients just had an unmet need that we were actually meeting. And for in particular, some of our corneal ectasias, naturally or unnatural, meaning somebody comes in with an injury, and those are things that obviously warrant some type of specialty contact lens, so those make sense. In particular, the one that stands out to me most is the first scleral lens that I fit was on a severely keratoconic patient, 28-year-old female coming into our office saying, I can't really see anymore out of my right eye, my left eye is really blurry, she's wearing glasses. The last time she tried to get fit with lenses for keratoconus, she was fit with gas-permeable lenses, and she said she had a really hard time adapting to them. She said she could see really well out of them, but she said it was just really tough for her to wear those lenses, so she never ended up wearing them. And in her mind, it was easier not to wear lenses and to go around blurry with the glasses than it was to wear or try to get used to those gas-permeable contact lenses. So we introduced the concept of scleral lenses to her. And not surprisingly, she was a little bit nervous. But what was interesting, and I heard some of you even say this today as you were being fit with these lenses, wow, I'm surprised at how little I feel these lenses. And the reason why is because they're actually sitting on the sclera or the conjunctiva overlying the sclera on the eye. For patients, I say, this lens literally sits on the white part of your eye, and it doesn't move around like a traditional gas permeable lens. And what that actually means is it's going to be a more comfortable experience for you. Well, I took this patient down from 2200 to 2020. Do you think I took her expectations and I exceeded those expectations? Yeah, especially when she was in the chair and she was crying, and I asked her, I said, Amy, are you okay? And she said, yeah, I just can't believe how good I'm seeing. I haven't seen this good for years. You know, I brought up from a patient management perspective, two cases that are, yeah, maybe obvious selections for a scleral lens, but what about that person who's a 3.5 to a 4 diopter sil who's been wearing soft contact lenses? Is there an opportunity to help them? Is there an opportunity to potentially make them see better? Yeah, there is. Because what's interesting is when we start fitting them into these alternative options, we realize how unhappy they were about their soft toric contact lenses, because now they know that there's a solution and they've experienced the solution. They start opening up about the challenges with their current contact lens options. Give you a perfect example of what I mean. Had a patient with 4 diopters of sil. She walked in expecting to get an update on her prescription. And for those high sil patients, we know that they're more likely to return to our practices, and we're more likely to simply retain those patients because they know that there's something that's very, very different with their eyes. Even though it's not an ocular disease related issue, they know that something's different with their eyes. So I presented the option of a scleral lens or a custom stable lens to this patient. And she said, yeah, I'd like to try that. She said, how's it going to feel on my eyes? I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it feels very similar to your soft lens, but I will tell you that some patients are even telling me that it's even more comfortable than their soft lenses. So we fit this patient in the lenses, and she did pretty well following the process that I talked about earlier. But what was interesting is this patient, from an examination perspective, was relatively neutral. There are some patients that you guys have probably already seen in your clinics where you feel like, I really connected with this person and I know that I delivered a positive experience. And then there are some patients where you leave the exam room and you think, I'm not even sure if this person truly understood some of the stuff that I was talking about. And I actually think this person might not even like we just didn't mesh. And that's kind of the experience that I had with this person. So she ended up leaving with the lenses after the fitting and after we ordered the lenses. And 2 of my technicians came back and they said, wow, Dr. B, she loves those lenses, huh? And I said, what do you mean? She couldn't stop raving about how good her vision was right after she put the lenses on, and she couldn't stop raving about how she could barely feel these contact lenses, and they actually felt better than her soft lenses. So she told all of this stuff to the people that were involved in helping her place the contact lenses on her eyes, teaching her how to clean them and remove the contact lenses, and she never told any of this to me. So I totally had this altered perception of this patient's experience in our practice, and I thought, man, with all the stuff that I'm doing, I thought I was going to get a better just kind of result from her, a better, more positive experience from her, and I just didn't feel it in the exam room, where the whole time she reserved all those feelings for our technicians. So it's important to understand how meeting, in my mind, this unmet patient demand is critical to 2 things. One, exceeding patient expectations, and by doing that, improving the patient experience. And 2, building that healthy contact lens practice. I challenge you guys to think about contact lenses just a little bit differently. Don't think about them as an afterthought. Don't think about them as something that's kind of annoying because it adds to the time of your exam. Think about it as something where you can truly differentiate yourselves, truly decommoditize the services that you're providing through the unique products that you're actually providing for these patients. You know, there's always this flow or exchange of processes that occur whenever you want to either improve something or change something or even create something. In our offices, we're constantly improving the processes and how we're actually taking care of our patients, and we're always trying to improve that experience. And we micro-dissect that patient experience in our practice, and by no means are we perfect, But the most important thing is that we know that we're not perfect. So we're constantly dissecting ourselves and saying, what could we possibly do better for these patients? And what can we possibly do to improve the patient experience? And we know that whenever we implement any type of change, there's actually, or it's a 4-step process to implementing it effectively. And this is really the last thing I wanted to share with you guys before we kind of wrap up this afternoon. Because if you guys can remember this to anything that you're trying to build, anything you're trying to change, anything you're trying to implement into your lives, both personal and professionally, I want you guys to think of this 4-step process. And every time we start something or we want to change something, there has to be some impetus to doing that. There has to be some type of challenge that's brought on by us that creates this idea. Meaning, I know that when you guys are at Pacific, you guys are learning a ton about octazes, about refraction, about contact lenses. But some of your best ideas may come from just hanging around with yourself and saying, we never heard about this. I wonder if we could do this better. And that's really the stimulus for any type of change or anything new, the idea. That's the very first thing. Now, in my mind, the idea, which is the first of this 4-step process, that's the easy one. Again, that's the one where you guys may be having a few beers with one another, and you guys might say, yeah, I'm going to write that down on this napkin. And sometimes you shove it in your pocket, sometimes you just throw it away, so sometimes you remember the idea, sometimes you forget the idea. But if you feel like that idea is enough to now start changing what you're doing, now you have to start planning out how you want to create or make that change. And that's really step 2. Taking that idea from just concept and really making it now a plan and making it as detailed of a plan as you possibly can. For example, when we wanted to start incorporating more specialty lenses in our practice, certainly I can do that from the exam room, but I need to make sure that everybody in my office is up to speed on things. So that if somebody calls my practice and says, hey, do you fit contact lens XYZ? The person answering the phone can confidently say, we absolutely do. When would you like to schedule that appointment to be fit in those lenses? The third thing, and this is where your back gets sore, shoulders get sore, and the reason why is because it's a lot of the heavy lifting. It's actually implementing the plan. So whatever you've actually decided to do, you're now taking that and you're moving it forward. And the fourth step of this whole process, and in my mind the most important thing, is literally the follow-up on whatever you want to do or whatever you want to change. So for example, if your goal is, hey, you know what, that's actually kind of cool, and in my 4th year, I actually would like to hone in on my patient rapport skills. I know the first quarter and the second quarter are really going to be about me honing down on my technical skills, but as I'm doing that, I want to be the best clinician possible, and I want to be perceived by that patient as the best clinician possible. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm communicating as many things as I possibly can in the exam room without losing efficiencies to my exam, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to turn a 15 to 30 minute process into a 2-hour process because you like talking about every single thing that you want to do. We don't want to do that. We want to become much more efficient at it. So is it too early to start practicing when you guys really start engaging in a lot of patient interactions? Absolutely not, because you know what's going to happen? You're going to start practicing these things and you're going to start developing some of your lingo, some of your terms that you're going to be using with a lot of the things that you're actually managing patients for. You're going to see some things personally that resonate, and you're going to see people's eyes light up and say, oh, I get it. And you're going to see you say some things that you think make so much sense to you, but a person is literally blank-faced and they just don't change, and there's no nodding or there's no type of positive response that that person's understanding what you're saying. So if that's something that you feel like, yeah, this is a change that I want to do and this is what I want to do aggressively, there's the idea. The plan is, here's how I'm going to do it every single time, and I'm going to start with my slit lamp exam because I'm pretty comfortable with my slit lamp exam right now. So every single time I'm examining a patient's eye, what I want to do is convey to them what I'm actually seeing in a positive way. And when I do that, if there's a healthy individual, what do I want to say to that patient to emulate to them that their eyes are healthy? And here's what I do. If I'm examining a healthy eye, I'm just taking a look at the front surface of your eye, and so far everything that I'm seeing is perfect on your right eye. Now I'm going to take a look inside of your eyes, and I can see that the optic nerve and the macula, 2 key components inside the eyes, are perfectly healthy. I'm going to go over to the other eye, do the exact same thing. Why do I do that? I want people to know exactly what they're looking at. I want people to feel like they're receiving a value when they come to see us. The plan or implementing the plan is actually doing it. After you planned it out and said, this is what I'm going to do initially, the slit lamp, and when I get comfortable with that, I'm actually going to continue building my rapport with patients through the refraction. How many times do we put a patient, and think about this when you get into the fourth year rotations, do you know that one of the things that patients like least about the experience with us is deciding which lens is clearer, lens 1 or lens 2? It's the one that we put least value in. Why? Because from a technical perspective, we learned that in our first year, right? And then we practiced. You guys probably know everybody's refractive error because you guys have probably refracted one another hundreds, if not thousands of times. So you guys know technically what to do. But now think about it from a patient's perspective. They think that if they can't decide between those two lenses, you're going to make them the wrong prescription in their glasses that they're paying good, hard-earned money with. So here's how I start that refraction process. You know, we're going to be going through a lot of lenses. I just want you to make sure that you know that sometimes it's going to be real difficult to tell the difference between a few of the lenses that we go through, and that's okay. Don't feel like you always have to give me one lens that's clearer than the other lens. If you feel like two lenses are about the same in terms of their clarity, you just let me know, because that's actually one of the things that we look for through this process. Now, we use an advanced refracting system in our office, but subjectively that still applies. If I'm showing them two views and they're feeling like it's the exact same thing, I want them to know that that's okay. I don't want them worrying when they go home that, oh boy, I wish I would have said 2 when I said 1. And when they get their glasses and they put them on and they feel just a little bit awkward, I don't want them to feel, oh God, it's because I answered 2 instead of 1 and I knew I reversed that. We've actually had some patients call our office back wanting to be re-refracted and telling us that they think they answered some of the questions incorrectly. So don't take that, even though it's a routine process for us, don't take that as routine from a patient's perspective. So again, that's where you're actually implementing this whole thing. The idea is, hey, I want to communicate more with my patients during the exam. The plan is, this is how I'm going to start to do it. Initially with my slit lamp, then with my 4-opter, then I'm going to start really communicating contact lens differences with patients. And then you implement the process, you actually physically practice it, and then the follow-up is most important, and you have to do an honest check on yourself. And you do it from patient expressions on their face, and you also do it from internally how you're actually feeling from the interactions that you've had with patients. And following that 4-step process, you will almost 100% of the time accomplish any of those goals that you actually want to do. So we talked about a lot of stuff, guys. We talked about this whole concept of commoditization and how I think it's critically important that we need to be thinking about decommoditizing ourselves. We need to be thinking about how we're actually going to be seeming different than everybody else that's doing eye exams. One of the ways we do that is at our office, you don't get an eye exam. You get a comprehensive assessment focused on your needs. So that if somebody asks, well, is that the same as an eye exam that I can get at place XYZ? We're not sure what they do over here, but let us tell you what we do. What does that do? That just takes us out of that box. It changes us from what they're envisioning as an eye exam to be, and they're entrusting us with that. The second phase, or the second thing that I want you guys leaving here with, is understanding the importance of patient experience and creating a positive patient experience, in particular from a contact lens perspective. And the reason why is we don't know the expectations that a patient has walking into our office, but if we can leverage the perceptions as high as possible against those expectations, we're more likely to actually have that patient have a positive patient experience. Now the question becomes, how do we leverage that perception? Well, that's the third thing in my mind that we need to take home from today. And one of the biggest ways we do that is through communication. And remember that the body language that you're utilizing is most important out of any of the 3 things that we use to measure communication, because it's body language, tone of voice, and the actual words that you use. The body language is the most important because over 50% of what you say is communicated through your body language. A little over 30% of what you communicate is the tone of your voice, and only 7% through the actual words that we utilize. Keep that in mind when you're interacting with your patients. The fourth thing that I want you guys leaving here with is understanding this whole concept of value and literally thinking about it as this getting your money's worth concept. And how can you leverage value with the patient? Exceed their expectations. Give them something that they didn't expect to get before they were walking into your office. Through our practice, we've made a conscious decision to give them options in terms of their contact lenses that we know they're not getting anyplace else. We know we're giving them something unique, and we know we're giving them something that they didn't expect. We're creating a perception for those patients about the services that we provide. And last but not least, this whole concept of this 4-point plan of how to implement, whether it be something new or whether to implement even change in what you're actually doing for improvement, creating an idea of whatever you want to do, taking that idea and making a plan from it, implementing that plan, and literally following up on that plan. And if you keep those things in mind as you progress, in particular through your 4th year, and you can practice these things through your 4th year, what's going to happen is when you graduate, you're going to hit the ground running. And when you hit the ground running, you're going to be significantly more value, or you're going to deliver more value to your patients, because you're going to be familiar with how to communicate with them. You're going to be familiar with the new contact lens technologies that are available, and you're going to be able to offer that to patients more comfortably than if you didn't, and if you needed to start practicing that day one after you graduated. So we've at this point talked about a lot of stuff. At this point, I want to open up the floor to questions, because I know that we talked about a lot of key concepts here. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we talked about or went over? Does anybody want to know any more about any of the concepts that we talked about or went over? And silence rings over the room.
You did a great job.
It means I answered internally all of their questions, Josh. Well, you guys have been, I mean, really a great, great group. Josh, thank you again for inviting me out here. It's been a blast just sharing, in my mind, those key things that I think are important for the students to keep in mind as they continue through their training.
Yes, thank you. Very important, very inspirational.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you.
So bear with me.